Welcome, folks. It is Wednesday, August the 20th. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandage. As we continue to track the developments with Hurricane Erin at this hour, still a Category 2 storm. And boy, is it a close call for the U.S. East Coast. No landfall, but with such a large storm, impacts already being felt. So tonight, that's what we're going to highlight on HHL. Now, Erin is larger and slightly stronger when we join you this evening. Again, still a Category 2, but the maximum sustained winds have ticked upwards. And also, as we talked about the last couple of nights, as it gains latitude, it was expected to expand in size. And it is a very large storm. It takes up a large portion of the southwestern Atlantic. And again, moving on a north to eventually northeast and easterly trajectory, moving farther and farther away from land. Now, fringe effects ongoing. Down through the Outer Banks, the first high tide cycle that's going to lead to numerous tide cycles in a row, with some water coming up and over NC-12, homes getting impacted, beach erosion underway as well. So this is going to be ongoing for the next 24 to 36 hours, and particularly along the Outer Banks of North Carolina and up into southeastern Virginia as well. And as we wrap up this video later on, two other tropical waves. The latest update shows that one is now a high chance of developing into our next named storm, which is Fernand. Chances up to 70% now in the next 7 days. Let's look back on the wind history with Erin, of course, became a Category 5 storm briefly on Saturday, and ever since has not been able to achieve, again, Category 5 status, thankfully. But it was a major hurricane for a long duration of time, and then it slowly ticked down. And we saw most recently a little uptick in intensity. We're up to 110 mile-per-hour winds, which is pretty much borderline between a Cat 2 and a Cat 3. Cat 3 is 111 miles per hour or greater. So we're pretty much there. It's like splitting hairs. But overall, its satellite presentation is a very large storm. And the 8 o'clock advisory just came down, still moving due north. But as you look at the loop of the satellite imagery here, there almost definitely seems to be an easterly component to its movement here. And that's good news. That's a good development. So it'll be heading away from the U.S. East Coast in the next 24 hours or so. But again, max winds 110, closer to the center. But Hurricane Hunter aircraft missions in the storm throughout the day today was finding significant winds well outside of that center there. So the wind field is certainly expanding, but it's going to pass safely off to the west of Bermuda, maybe getting some fringe winds there, but overall dodging a bullet for sure. And again, the outermost western impacts here along the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now you can kind of switch things up here on water vapor imagery and see a little more clearly the players on the field. Obviously, the big player is Hurricane Erin right now as a Category 2, but what we've been waiting for is the trough to dig on in from the north and west, a cold front. And you can clearly see that showing up here. This drapes across the area. And this is going to give Erin that little nudge off to the east and northeast and safely steer it away from the U.S. East Coast. By the way, that front is holding back an autumn air mass. And it is going to be quite pleasant across the eastern U.S. after Erin clears on out of here later this work week. All right, in terms of the Saffir-Simpson scale, again, 110 mile-per-hour winds right at the top of that Category 2 status there. It may briefly jump back up to a Category 3. Doesn't change the forecast here. It's just going to be a minor uptick in its sustained winds. But overall, very large, very powerful storm. And keep in mind, all of that wind energy being put onto the ocean surface is just driving the ocean north and up against the east coast. Especially northeastern North Carolina, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, seeing those wave heights slowly tick upwards. And when you get the high tide, all of that starts to come on inland, and we're seeing already significant overwash, and it's still early. Its path overall, over the weekend when it was a Cat 5, it was just about 150 miles to the north of Puerto Rico, and then it gradually moved west-northwest, and then most recently it's been turning due north, which was anticipated by the National Hurricane Center. And then quickly there enough, we'll see it turn to the northeast, and then east-northeast, and pick up forward speed as that front gives it that little boot out to sea. All right, here's a look at it now, Category 2. 130 mile-per-hour winds here, moving to the north at 14 miles per hour. And a look back at the last 24-hour loop here on infrared definitely had a look of intensification here as we went back about 6 hours when it was pretty much right here. An influx of convection around the center, and then it just expanded. You can just really see it taking up more and more space as it moved to the north there, and then you're starting to see the interaction with that boundary coming in from the northwest. That's going to also start to impart some shear on it. and you're going to start to see the storm kind of get drawn out a little bit. It was much more symmetrical here down to the south, and as it's lifted in the north, you can kind of see it getting drawn out as it's getting lifted from the winds aloft, coming in more out of the southwest. That'll eventually be nudging it eastwards. But very interesting stuff here. Visible satellite imagery, we'll give it a second here to pop up. Sometimes it just doesn't cooperate, but visible satellite was quite impressive. We did have a storm that was very large in size and still is, 750 miles in diameter here. And the closest point to the east coast here, Hatteras Island, you're about 300 miles, the center of Erin, off to the south and east there. And maybe it comes within 250 to 280 miles of the coastline there. So tropical storm force winds will likely come up over the Outer Banks, maybe up even in southeastern Virginia here, but the center is staying safely off to the shore there. Now, Hurricane Hunter aircraft still in the system. They've been flying pretty much nonstop missions into the storm since last Thursday. They rebased over St. Croix, Virgin Islands, on Wednesday last week, and now they're flying right out of Keesler Air Force Base now, out in Biloxi, Mississippi. So they're a little bit closer now to the storm system than where they were, but still flying missions in there. NOAA aircraft, Hurricane Hunters, and U.S. Air Force Hurricane Hunters flying in there as well. Now, we did see that little jump in intensification here as it moved over some very warm waters. This is almost like jet fuel, okay? The purple shadings is sea surface temperature between 85 and 88 degrees. Now it has moved out of that environment. So the window for it to intensify further, even though we've got favorable dynamics aloft, I think that window's closing pretty quickly. So it's not going to change the forecast at all, but a Category 2 storm here, maybe baseline Category 3 here in the short term before jetting on off to the east-northeast. Now, massive wave generator, right? We've been looking at these buoys for days now, and last night, this buoy down here, as it passed over it, was producing nearly 40-foot waves. Now it's clocking an 18-footer. We've got 24-foot waves here in this buoy that's pretty much just due northwest of the center, and then due north is another buoy clocking 22-foot waves. And it's also got wind speeds. We've got a 60-mile-per-hour gust there, just updated with a 27-foot wave on that buoy, and 45-mile-per-hour winds, probably about 200 miles to the north of the center there. And even some buoys closer to the coast near Hatteras, wind speeds 20 to 40, and those waves are getting much higher, 17-foot waves here just off the coast of Cape Hatteras. In terms of wind speeds right now, wind gusts, nothing really to write home about on land. Again, the buoys are clocking some higher wind gusts, and of course the winds are always going to be stronger over the water. You don't have that frictional component to slow down the winds like you have with land interaction. So the strongest of the winds will remain out in marine areas as Erin approaches here, but still some land locations could get wind gusts, especially in the Outer Banks that approach 40 miles per hour or surpass it, which is why we do have the tropical storm warnings up. Even though the warning would be for sustained winds of 39 miles per hour or greater, we're not going to see that. We'll just see some gusts from time to time, up to 40 to maybe 50 as you get closer to Hatteras Island. But sustained winds, most likely not going to be tropical storm force. And this is extended now all the way up to the central Jersey coast and all the way south, almost down to just well north of Wilmington right there near Cape Fear, seeing some of the tropical storm conditions possible here with that track well offshore. I want to show you some cameras now out in through the Outer Banks, and we're going to check in there live here in just a little bit. Highway 12, Oregon Inlet South, looking okay there right now. You go over to Etheridge Bridge on Highway 12 as well, no issues. But things start to change a little bit. You get to the canal zone on Highway 12, and you're starting to see some sand getting blown over from the dunes here. Look at how close the ocean is to the water there. And then you get over to Buxton near Hatteras, and you've got significant overwash here. They've got some heavy machinery that's been moving away some of the sand that's been washing over on the roadway there, but water standing on the roadways. And then check out this. Look at this. The waves are toppling over the dunes now at Hatteras and Frisco. This should be Highway 12 impassable at this time, with water now covering the entire road surface and the ocean coming right up to the dunes and crashing through them and eroding them here at a pretty solid pace. And again, it's early. We still have 3 more high tide cycles to get through before things look a little bit better. So coming up after a quick break, we're going to go live out to the Outer Banks with Derek Lytle and to Virginia Beach with Taylor Stephenson for a look at the conditions. We're going to talk about what impacts lie ahead as well, and an updated outlook on those 2 other tropical waves brewing in the Atlantic Basin right after a quick break. Hi, welcome back, folks. This is Hurricane Hub Live. Here's the 8 o'clock advisory on Hurricane Erin. Category 2 storm, again, borderline Cat 2, Cat 3. It is expected to make a quick jump back up to a major hurricane status, Category 3, 115-mile-per-hour winds. Again, doesn't change the forecast. And then it shoots off to the east and northeast and is not projected to make a landfall here. Now, this is interesting because that's kind of a cool stat because storms that have made it or peaked at a Category 5 rarely do not make landfall. I think Erin is like one of 2 or 3 others on record that won't make a landfall, which is great. We don't want a Category 5 landfall or a major hurricane by any means. So safely out to sea here, and then it begins an extratropical transition as it heads towards the Arctic Circle and becomes a storm that's not going to bother anybody. All right, that's the most recent storm track, but how about the history of these tracks, right? There's been a lot of changes to it, obviously. Every forecast does change, but the track here originally was sagging to the south, and then as we got north of Puerto Rico, we began to see a west-southwest correction here, and then it's verifying now on the far western fringe of all the forecasts previously to that, and it's going to, again, take that loop on out to the north and east and out to sea and miss the U.S. East Coast as it was always forecast to do. All right, Hurricane Erin, Cat 2, what are the impacts? What can we expect here going forward? Well, rainfall-wise, not a lot. All the heaviest rain is staying well offshore, maybe a few outer band showers or downpours. That's about it. And most likely locations to see those would be the Outer Banks. Wind, tropical storm gusts, most likely closest to the coast. Outer Banks, southeastern Virginia, Delmarva, eastern shore of Virginia, maybe even up into New Jersey. And then, of course, Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard may get some gusts, too, as it expands and heads to the north. This is going to be a wind, waves, and tides event for any areas that are going to get the fringe impacts. The waves have been large, and they're going to get larger. That's going to lead to coastal erosion. And then at times of high tide, those waves will crash over land and lead to some tidal flooding. We're looking at instances of that for 4 high tides starting tonight, both high tide cycles Thursday, and then again in the Friday morning, even long gone after the storm has pushed well to the east. Here's a look at projected rainfall here from the mid-Atlantic down to the southeast. Not much. And even this up through Saturday is not even associated with Erin here. Erin will be long gone by that point, so rain, not a big issue. Wind field expanding here. You can see the cone, or the envelope, I should say, of tropical storm force winds in the yellow, up and over the Outer Banks of North Carolina as we get into Thursday morning. Strongest of the winds there. And it continues to grow in size and expand as it moves out to the east-northeast. May even clip Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard there with some gustier winds, and then steers clear of Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada as it builds out to the east-northeast. All right, wind gusts. See some wind gusts here. Hatteras up to 50 miles per hour. By early Thursday morning, about to say Saturday. My days are all messed up. Virginia Beach up and over close to tropical storm force wind gusts, maybe getting up to 40. And then notice here as we get to Thursday night, after it's clearing the eastern seaboard, or the mid-Atlantic, I should say, we're getting wind gusts near Nantucket, 34, 35. Nothing major to write home about. You've seen nor'easters bring bigger impacts. And wave heights, we've seen them rocking and rolling. We looked at the buoys, and we're seeing many buoys over 20, 25 feet. And that's what's indicated here in the forecast. Closer to the coastline, maybe getting up to 20-foot waves just off the Outer Banks coast. Up to Virginia Beach, 10, 12, 13-foot waves, even after the center of Erin is due east and pulling away from the coast. Still looking at some wave action here into Thursday night, and even rough seas during the day on Friday, too. And rip current risk will stay with us right into this upcoming weekend. And all of that wind energy, now that it's positioned to the southeast of Hatteras, all of the winds are coming in out of the southeast and then eventually east and northeast, piling up the water along the Outer Banks. And those sustained winds, especially at high tide, is going to lead to significant surging, in particular for this area, up to 4 feet, because the average elevation through the Outer Banks is like 8 to 10 feet. So a lot of areas will experience some water. Nothing like they haven't seen before, but it's certainly going to be impactful. So the bottom line here, Erin will not get any closer to the United States. Fringe impacts through Thursday night, and no other threats to the United States within the next 7 days. Now, there is the possibility of seeing development, though, in the next 7 days. And we've got 2 other tropical waves out there right now. The one that's closest to any land, closer to the Leeward Islands, and is projected to miss it to the north and east there, has now a 70% chance of developing. If it does develop, it'll be brief. And if it does develop, it'll get the name Fernan, which is the next name on the list, the 6th name. And then right behind it, a wave that's already been tagged as Invest 99L. This has not even been tagged yet, but this has moderate odds in the short term and the long term of 40% as it moves on off towards the the west, southwest. And models here, since it has been tagged as an invest, we are getting some model plots, some spaghetti plots on this. And notice how initially there are a whole bunch of models here locking on to development. And then they all drop off, and there's only a few lingering past that because conditions are not supposed to be all that conducive here as it gets farther to the west behind these other two waves. So we'll likely not even see this really. If it does develop, it'll be briefly in the short term and then kind of peter on out. At least that's how it looks right now. We'll have to continue to monitor it, but it's nowhere near land, and it's going to be one of those what we call low riders, low latitude system here, that if it does hold together, could scoot on through the northern coast of South America. All right, that's the latest on our discussion, folks. I want to send it out now to my colleague, meteorologist Taylor Stephenson, who's joining us this evening out at the Virginia Beach ocean front. Actually, you're near Lynn Haven Inlet now. That's one of the areas, Taylor, that's projected to see significant tidal flooding starting tonight's high tide and then into tomorrow. Have you seen any of that so far?
Hey, good evening, Tim. I haven't really seen much in the way of any type of flooding. There's actually a lot of people out here right now just enjoying the just choppier waters right now here at the Lynn Haven Inlet. And as you can see, I'll step aside, the gorgeous sunset that is just starting to end behind me. So there is not really much going on at the moment, but as you said, we are expecting tidal flooding. That's one of our main concerns, just because, as you know, we are just geographically unique living here in Virginia and Northeast North Carolina, where the Outer Banks kind of stick out, but even here in Virginia, those northeast winds change the dynamics of everything. So starting, like you said, tonight, we'll start to see some of those flood stages entering the nuisance or minor stages, but by tomorrow, the Lynn Haven Inlet, places around the ocean front and around Duck Pier in the Outer Banks could enter major flood stage.
Now, Taylor, what do you think this means for those areas looking around where you are right now? If the waters do come up, say, to what's projected tomorrow night, about 24 hours from now, I think it's projected to be 5.8 feet or something like that, so major tidal flooding. Where you're at, do you think that there will be some water where you're standing, and could that be, near any structures or any buildings?
So where I'm standing right now, Tim, I do expect the water to kind of come up to where I'm at. And even as the high tide comes in, we're just maybe about 3 to 5 feet away from where the water is washing up now. I don't expect it to really hit any structures. There are some stairs just behind me, behind this camera, but no buildings that really would be in the way of this. That's the good news. But places, like I said, around the Outer Banks have a worse situation going on. And even places around Norfolk as well, as Sewell's Point starts to get a little bit more push of water from the effects of Erin. We could see the Hague, places around there, starting to see some water buildup, even spots in downtown Ghent and Park Place, seeing a little bit of water buildup here. But I would expect the water to reach me where I am right now. If I can see the camera turn just a little bit to show the water where it is at the moment, and you can kind of see it's still remaining right by that shoreline, but I have seen, and I'll walk over here to where the water has built up to about this point over the course of the day. But again, I was maybe about 5 to 6 feet away from here and where I was standing there earlier, and I would expect maybe some wash up as we get into tomorrow night. And as we've mentioned here through the course of 13 News Now, between you and Evan and also Hunter and Craig today, we could expect, again, the highest tides tomorrow right around about 8 o'clock to have the most significant tidal flooding impacts.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch how things progress, tide cycle over tide cycle. And this will be a prolonged, impactful event in terms of tidal flooding. This is the first of 4 high tides. We're expecting some minor to moderate to even major tidal flooding in those areas. Taylor, we really appreciate your reporting. Love the high clouds making for a very pretty sunset out there this evening. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here in the studio soon.
Sounds good. See you later.
All right, coming up after a quick break, we're going to check in with Derek Lytle, who's down in the Outer Banks for the latest conditions there. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. We just checked in with Taylor Stephenson in Virginia Beach. Now we want to head south down to Derek Lytle, who's in Oregon Inlet, down through the Outer Banks. Derek, you've been very active today, traveling up and down the Outer Banks looking for impacts that are ongoing there. Now, Taylor up to the north just got through high tide, the first high tide cycle of many that we expect to be running higher than normal. So far, so good. No major impacts there up in Virginia Beach. But you're telling me there's probably a different story playing out farther to the south, closer to the center of Hurricane Erin this evening. What could you tell us and show us?
Yeah, hey, Tim, I got a different picture to paint, like you said, just now over here. We spent the day going through Rodanthe, and we actually went all the way to Buxton again, where we joined you in the stream yesterday evening. And the power of the waves there were no joke. We were trying to get our stuff done and get out of there. But while we were there, the waves just creep up on you where you can't get away in time. And, the power actually took away part of the structures there to some of the residents. And we saw some pretty decent damage, some stair casings almost blown away completely and tucked underneath layers of sand. We did head out to head back this way in fear of getting stuck on that side of 12 around 5 o'clock. And just so you know it's NCDOT made the decision at 6:30 to then close 12 after the Mark Bass Night Bridge. You can see right here, it still remains closed. That happened around 6:30, and we just got out here around 6:45, 7 o'clock, and we spoke to a man who said he needs life-saving medication on the other side of this road closure, and he was over here for a hospital visit, and they actually ended up letting him through. He did have a bigger pickup truck, but it seems to be a case-by-case basis. The NCDOT is sharing with us they don't know when this could to open back up, but we've seen the pictures firsthand of that water overflowing and overwashing onto 12. So, Tim, pretty glad that we were able to get back just moments before that overtook the roadway.
Yeah, and Derek, we joined you 24 hours ago, and conditions, were starting to change a bit. They've certainly drastically changed in the last 24. I'm interested to know, and folks that you've talked to, folks that have decided to kind of, wait out the storm and just stay put. With today's changes, have they changed their minds at all? Is there a little more urgency to maybe heed the warnings and evacuate, or are folks just going to stay put, you think?
Yeah, Tim, it seems like there might be a little more damage than they would want or even expect, but it sounds like they're willing to ride this out through the weekend. A lot of locals here, whether it's Rodanthe or Salvo or other communities, even offered us a place to crash on their couch, very welcoming people that seem to have each other's back. So it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere, but, we definitely, outside of those motels in Buxton, I could feel the current being stronger and, definitely more significance. And that wasn't even at high tide today, Tim. So, I can only imagine it got much worse after we got out of there.
Yeah, Derek, it'll be very interesting to see when we join you again tomorrow night how things have changed. And probably at this time, it'll be the worst of the impacts being felt down through the Outer Banks. Derek, we appreciate your reporting, and we'll see you again tomorrow. All right, let's finish things up with tropical trivia, folks. Yesterday's question was, in what year did the first Hurricane Hunter flight go into a storm? Well, it was in the year 1943. long, long time ago, and it took place in the Gulf. It was a 1943 out of Bryan Army Airfield in Texas, piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Joe Duckworth. He flew into a hurricane that was headed for Houston, Texas, all the way back in 1943. And just think about how much the technology has changed since then. All right, tonight's tropical trivia. When was the last time we had 0 hurricane landfalls in the U.S.? I'm talking about a specific year's Atlantic season. Was it in 1977, 1999, 2013, or more recently in 2015? I'll have the answer tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. And remember, we are here every night at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. We'll see you back here tomorrow.